Start the meeting. It's 5 o'clock. Thank you for your attendance in advance. Thank you, as always, to our officers that support us uh, throughout the process, before, during, and after. And thank you to Rufus, who turns up religiously each week and reports. Very important job reporting the activities out into the community of what our council does and our committee. So thank you for that. We appreciate that. Let's get on. So declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? There are none. Public question time. There are no members of the public. Yeah, okay. So just before I do that, any apologies? So we do have an apology from Councillor Fuller, who is on the mainland attempting to get back. It's a short agenda. He may not be here in time for the meeting. So his apologies are noted. So public question time. There are no public. I have a written question. Therefore, we will provide a written response to the written question that we have. Chairman's announcements, I have none. Let's move straight on to the report of the Cabinet Member for Children's Services firstly on the school term dates and holiday calendar, and then followed by the post-16 school transport policy statement. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. It will be very quick. The first paper is the academic year term dates for 26-27. It's seeking formal approval. As the paper notes on paragraphs 4 and 18, there have been no changes to the pattern and plan of the year. And we, as have done for a number of years now, retain a 2-week October half term. Therefore, I simply take us to the recommendation. The Cabinet, I would seek the Cabinet to approve the proposed calendar of term dates for 2026-27 as outlined in Appendix 1. And I look to a seconder.
Jonathan, Councillor Andre has seconded that. Any questions, any comments? No questions. No comments. Maybe then I'll just ask Jonathan, is the 2-week, you just mentioned it, the 2-week in October, is that still working well for the majority of families and children on our island?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you for that. We've had a proposer and a seconder. Those in favour, they show that's unanimous. Thank you, Jonathan. And on to the post-16 transport policy.
Thank you, Chair. This is actually seeking authority to consult on the policy. Policy has been presented as an appendix in the documentation we have. We're required to consult each year. The specific proposal on which we'll be consulting, where there's potential change, is set out in paragraph 12A of the report, and that's where there is a parental contribution, which currently stands at £570 per academic year, and there's a proposal, as I say, proposal at this stage for consultation to increase that from £570 per year to £582.54. That is very simply it. Obviously, this is a situation where there's no automatic entitlement, but a discretionary power of the council to award transport, and that happens in relation to special educational needs and disability instances. But as the appendix notes, there are other sources of support available, but the proposal is in relation to those elements of support the council gives where there is a parental contribution. So the recommendation is set out in paragraph 3, and I would ask that the Cabinet provides authority to consult on the proposed changes, minor changes as they're described, to the post-16 transport policy, and for the leader to delegate authority to the Strategic Director of Children's Services to review the consultation information and make a decision on the outcome at the appropriate time. And I'd look for a seconder.
That's seconded by councillor Andre. Just before I move on, it is to say that corporate scrutiny recommended that the report be noted. Any questions or comments on this? There being none, my comment would be, I'm pleased to see that whilst there is an increase, and that's always a difficult thing to implement, that it is in line with the consumer price index on inflation. It's about £1 a month, the increase. So hesitate to say it's modest. Any increase is difficult for people in the current times, but I'm pleased we've managed to, in the face of inflation, to maintain a reasonable charge for this service. It's been proposed and seconded. Those in favour, therefore, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. And on to the report of the Cabinet for Housing and Finance, Councillor Stevens, on the discretionary rate relief policy, page 35.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to point out some of the paragraphs within the paper. I know members have got them. I think people online might be interested in some of them, so we'll read them verbatim. The changes. This is changes to the Domestic Rating Act 2023, and I'll read. The Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government will bring forward primary legislation to amend the Local Government Finance Act of 1988 to end charitable relief eligibility to private schools from the 1st of April 2025. The government's legislative changes are primarily driven by the aim to create a more equitable system and to bring private schools currently receiving charitable support in line with state schools, to also generate additional revenue for public services in England. And so I want you to look at that, and I want you also to look at paragraph 6 on page 36. If you turn the page, and paragraph 6 says, in the changes to the Non-Domestic Rating Act of 2023, in the recent autumn budget, the Chancellor sets out changes to be made to private schools to remove the current charitable rate relief they receive from the 1st of April 2025. The Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government will bring forward primary legislation to amend the Local Government Finance Act of 1988 to end charitable relief eligibility to private schools. I'll just touch on a few of the points now before I move on to some of the other paragraphs, but I would like to say that in February, we set a legal balanced budget in which we also brought in new charging mechanisms for secondary homes and other such things, such as empty properties was a previous year, and so on. We realised that our state-run schools on the Isle of Wight pay their rates. What I would say is that up until the 1st of April this year, the private entities on the Isle of Wight education schools have had this relief. What I want to say is that when we're looking at this, we're looking at quite possibly a six-figure sums involved in this, and remembering that also that our state-run schools also pay back into us as the Isle of Wight Council. Once again, six-figure sums. So what we're losing out to private education establishments, we are getting in from state-run schools. That hardly seems to be a logical way of doing these things, because, as we all know, education comes at a cost. And the thing is that our state-run schools, as we know, because we're going along that pathway of a new education strategy for Isle of Wight education. We're looking at the costs and the facilities, the service, the standards, right the way through. So we are, as a cabinet, and I feel also across the membership of the Isle of Wight Council, quite acquainted with the cost of education on the Isle of Wight and per school establishment. And therefore, as I say, we're looking at six-figure sums. There is an impact assessment done by the benefits manager, and that's Appendix 3 on page 89. And you'll see from that it's quite the run. There's nothing extraordinarily wrong with actually in moving this forward. I feel that on page 37, we were given the situation with regards to equity and fairness, revenue generation, policy alignment, and financial impact on schools. I will touch on each of those. Equity and fairness. Currently, many private schools benefit from charitable status, which allows them to receive up to 80% relief on their business rates, with some local authorities topping this up by 100%. We haven't done that as a local authority. We see that the 80% was quite equitable and passed forward to the private entities. We would say that currently this relief is seen as unfair, and it provides significant financial advantages to fee-paying schools compared to our state schools, which do not receive such extensive relief. The Isle of Wight Council does not currently, as I said, provide private schools with a 20% discretionary top-up. Revenue generation, removing or reducing this relief is expected to increase tax revenues. These additional funds can be redirected to support public services, including state education on the Isle of Wight. I think it's important that rather than draining or hemorrhaging some funding from the Isle of Wight Council, we should be looking to make sure that we invest in the Isle of Wight Council and invest in our services. I'll just touch on the financial impact on schools. Financial impact on schools, whilst this change will likely increase operational costs for private schools, it's intended to encourage a more level playing field between private and state education sectors. And to go back, I'll open it up for discussion, but I will be going for the options 1 and 3 on page 35 and 36 after the debate. Do you want me to read the options out at the moment, Chair, and go and look for a seconder? Option 1, align with state schools, exclude private schools from discretionary rate relief to match the new legislation effective from the 1st of April 2025, removing their mandatory relief, ensuring consistency with state schools and avoiding a cost to the council in providing this funding. And option 3, that the Director of Finance and Section 151 officer to make any minor future changes required to the discretionary rate relief policy. Thank you.
I'm looking for a seconder. Julie has seconded that. Before we do anything else, I'm going to, corporate scrutiny had some things to say about this, and I'll read those out to you now. They said that the committee supports option 2 of the Cabinet report and urges Cabinet to strongly reconsider the application of this policy with a view to not applying on those 2 schools because of the detrimental effect it will have on the island and future regeneration. That if implemented, a full equality impact assessment is completed in relation specifically to the island, looking at the scope and understanding the extent to which those schools as not-for-profit charities help the local community and the impact on their bottom line and ability to provide scholarships. That was corporate scrutiny's comments and recommendations. We've had a proposal and seconder, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that there is an impact assessment that has been undertaken, as I did state. And I also feel that when we're starting to talk about private education and state education, which we should, because you can't talk of one without the other, especially with the financial constraints. What I would say is that private education can manage their finances a lot easier than state education, where state education is on, as we've gone through school placement planning, etc. And they can't move their finances around to the degree that quite possibly an independent, privately run school can, with through their bursar, to how can I say, to manage their financial accounts in a far more malleable way, to make sure that they're not dictated to by legal entities from central government saying this is what you've got to do, this is what you can do. There is an amount that private education can do to manage their finances in a more liquid manner. And I'll leave it at that, but I do feel that there are ways that can be sought by the private education establishments to take that forward. I would say that there was also a statement made within corporate scrutiny with regards to the way that the Isle of Wight is perceived and the education opportunities are perceived from afar, with, shall we say, people coming to the island and looking for first-rate education and looking for private education. And looking at the amount of the education cost to the parent or guardian of any would-be pupil. What I would say is that we are trying across the piece to raise the education standards throughout the Isle of Wight, and I know that the private schools are doing the same. But I would say that I think the amount that this would bring to a private school is about £5 per week per child, and I think that is, and I'm not going to dwell too much on the financial side, but that is not out of the ballpark by any stretch of imagination for a parent bringing a child into private education on the Isle of Wight. I don't see it as being a deterrent for people to come and settle on the Isle of Wight. And if they settle on the Isle of Wight and they choose private education, then an extra £5 a week is not going to cause too much grief. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Jones Evans and then Councillor Bacon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very happy to second this. Obviously, we're coming in line with the legislation that's come down from government, and we all want equality, don't we? We all want everyone to have, a fair crack at life, and having a good education is really important. And yes, private schools exist, and some people are able to afford to send their children, and that's their right. But there shouldn't be any other, incentives, really, I think, or any other ways that they sort of the playing field, as Councillor Stevens said, is uneven. I just was really taken by the the climate and sustainable development goals wheel, which is part of the impact assessment there. And you can see all the greens we're getting into. And I did listen to corporate scrutiny. I was here for the whole meeting on Tuesday. It was very interesting listening to some of the arguments made, and they're valid arguments, but I think this wheel actually takes into account some of those as well. And so I just wanted to say, I think on balance, you know, the positives we're getting, when you look at that impact assessment, I'm more than happy to go along with it. And if you've got 5 minutes, you can pop on to the Charity Commission's website, and you can go and see the returns that these charities, some charities make, well, all charities, sorry, but you can actually see what their last returns were and what they've got in the bank. So it's quite interesting, quite revealing. So I'm more than happy to support this.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be succinct, because this is obviously a situation where we're simply making a recommendation, and I assume there will be a fairly full debate at full council next week. But as Councillor Stevens has set out and alluded to, we're in a situation where the school system generally, the wider school system, is strapped for cash. So I was actually quite stunned by what was coming out of scrutiny on Tuesday evening, and particularly the fact there was no reference or comparison to the situation in state schools. Yes, there are some who, whatever reason, have mandatory relief, but there are at least 20 who don't, and are paying these bills. So if we're talking about equity, that would suggest, if our interest is in supporting the education system, surely we'd extend relief to all those, rather than just giving a privilege to the already privileged, rather than those that need it. So I very much support the recommendation. I will be very interested to hear the debate that we will have next week, but I hope some of those who have been commenting on this will look a little more closely at the wider situation of the school system and the impact, as I say, on the wider state system of the rate system. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Further comments? I'd just add then, thank you, Jonathan, for making that very clear that we are recommending to full council. This is a full council decision next week, not cabinet tonight. That there are confusions and complexities with government legislation that's coming that specifically makes it clear that rate relief shouldn't be applied to private schools, I believe, and that there may be a contradiction even if full council, certainly tonight in this cabinet, were to consider another journey other than government's intention on this. So we've had a proposer, thank you Ian for that, seconder. Those in favour of option 1 and option 3 as read out by Councillor Stevens, please show. That's unanimous, thank you all. And Ian, the purchase of 18 units of temporary accommodation. Would you like to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I would. I think this is a story or the possibility of actually doing this is actually showing where the Alliance administration has been over the years very prudent with our finances and making sure that when we acquire property or we have an outlay of funding on anything, it is sought to make sure that one, it is the Isle of Wight Council can afford it and it is affordable. 2, that is going to assist us with our corporate plan and our direction of travel within that corporate plan. And 3, it's for the good of the people of the Isle of Wight. And you can move those 3 elements around from making transpose 3 to 1 and what have you, because they are transposable. What I would say is that it's very, very important to understand that we have worked and managed to come through unscathed, or relatively unscathed, financially through very, very hard times. And it's through those hard times that we've managed to actually lower our sights a little bit and start to be realist about our direction of travel with things. And what I would say is that working alongside private developers, and not just sitting there and waiting for an affordable housing quota, is something that this Isle of Wight Council has suddenly started to take on board. We've worked alongside our directors, our senior management team, and in particularly the Section 151 officer, to make sure that what we bring forward is financially viable and also sustainable and equates to a positive contribution to island life. And I think that that's very, very important. What I want to go through first, though, is that once again, looking at the 18 temporary accommodations within Godshill, we're looking to make those part of our transition from temporary housing and temporary accommodation into permanent accommodation. These dwellings will not be utilised for a permanent dwelling. What they will do is assist us in moving people out of very temporary accommodation, such as caravans, bed and breakfast, and HMOs, etc. Houses of multiple occupation. I want to just touch on the two options. You'll find those on page 101. And if you look at 101, if I can find it, there's option 1, and this is the option we're going for, that the purchase of the 18 units of accommodation to provide temporary accommodation for island residents and those who are eligible is approved. The other one is not to approve it, but I'm looking for the option 1. What I would say that is if you go to page 99, and I hope you do, for those without the paperwork in front of them or access to the agenda item, we're looking at actually cash subsidy from the Isle of Wight Council is where is it? 1.579 million, and the elements within that to make it up that number are from Section 106 planning Section 106 funding is 785,000. Affordable Housing Capital Scheme, which we touched on in the budget but didn't take everything, was 794,491 pounds. So the balance, we managed to do that, and in doing so, quite prudently, have taken over 50% of what we would have had to borrow. So the balance of funding to acquire the properties was £1,309 116. I think that sums it up really. I know that there'll be a few comments from yourself, Leader, and I know that the director is online, Laura Gordian. I dare say she would like to mention a few things on this, because this is a very noteworthy item, a very positive way forward. The times I've walked through that door over the last 3 years and had my had a kicking from individuals within this chamber over the lack of housing and the lack of accommodation, etc., etc. In very, very challenging times, with reduced finances coming into the Isle of Wight Council, and a reduction in rentable premises and accommodation outside of the Isle of Wight Council, I think that we've taken a bit of a pounding, but we've always managed to continue to provide advice to keep people in their own homes as much as we have to actually move things around in a positive manner. So I'm really, this is one of the big stories really of this month, leader. And as I say, there's a whole list within the paperwork about the size of the units, etc. But as I say, I'm going to stop there and leave it at that. I'll come back after everyone's had a discussion and debate on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose we need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Lucioni. Thank you, Karen. Just to say that corporate scrutiny recommended that the committee supports the purchase of the 18 units as a step in the right direction. So thank you for corporate scrutiny for that encouragement. Any questions or comments? Is there anything, Laura, you would like to add to what we've just heard from Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. I have nothing to add. I'm simply here to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Well then, I'll just make a couple of comments because Councillor Stevens is right. It's so difficult to deliver homes in the current economic climate. To note, as I've said quite often, to deliver affordable homes, and this is for temporary accommodation, deliver affordable homes requires subsidies, and subsidies have to be paid for. And that seems to have been lost on certain people where the money comes from to subsidise. In this case, it's around 80,000. It's £87,000 a subsidy per unit. We're happy to have found that money through a variety of means, Section 106 and funding we already had. And that has enabled this to go forward as a scheme for the 18 properties that we will use as temporary accommodation. Overall, my calculation is, correct me if I'm wrong, and it's a broad estimate, but overall we are going to assist the lives of 18 families and people, perhaps a few more because of more than one person in a family, in this accommodation. We'll be saving the temporary accommodation costs. We will be buying assets, properties that this council own and will own completely in 50 years' time, while still providing the property at the time and hopefully still receiving an income from that property. My estimate is in doing this, not only do we start to improve people's lives, start to improve the temporary accommodation situation with some control over it for this council. My estimate is that we save this council about 400,000 a year over 50 years. So I think this is a win-win-win-win situation. We've had a proposal and a second. No further questions. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. And we will move on to the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, Councillor Andre, with the Isle of Wight Domestic Abuse Strategy, followed by the Better Care Fund.
Thank you, Chair. I have a change of recommendation for this item as follows. Chair, considering the recommendations made by both the Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Health and Social Care and the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, there is an opportunity, I believe, for further and wider consultations and engagement that would inform and broaden the final document. And it's therefore appropriate that we pause consideration of the strategy tonight. I am proposing that we defer the domestic abuse strategy together with the safe accommodation strategy, referring back to the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board, to the newly formed cross-party Health Scrutiny Committee, which will be under the forthcoming committee system commencing in May, to give an opportunity for public consultation, and for the soon-to-be appointed Isle of Wight Director for Public Health to be able to have input so that a final version can be developed that all partners can take ownership of. This is testament to the importance that this administration is placing on this strategy. I would like to thank all those officers who have contributed to the development of this strategy thus far and very much appreciate their hard work in bringing this document forward. This is my recommendation and I look for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you. That's been seconded by Councillor Luciani. Thank you both. I will add again from Corporate Scrutiny, who recommended that the strategy be withdrawn for further work and consultation and brought back to the Adult Social Care, Public Health and Housing Needs Committee as a matter of urgency. So there we are. Any questions or comments?
Chair, can I just clarify, we are deferring, we are not withdrawing, just to make that
Thank
point.
you for that, clarity. Of course, tautology, but you're absolutely right. Thank you for that clarification. Karen.
Just adding to it really that what Councillor Sarah Redrup's done as well, from what I've read, is great work. But from my point in my portfolio at the moment, and then going forward to the Community Safety and Environment Committee that will happen, I think there's some work alongside of it, certainly looking at with the Police and Crime Commissioner and then the Deputy, whoever that will be, and making sure that there's the right funding for the right services as well. Because I think some services are a bit under strain, and we certainly need to make sure we've got the right services for the right people when they need it.
Thank you for that. Any further comments? Just to add that we appreciate the work that has been spent and inputted into this document, and the opportunity now to have wider consultation is very much appreciated in noting the comments of both health scrutiny and corporate scrutiny. Councillor Luciani, second. With therefore propose a second. No further questions. Those in favour of deferring this motion? Thank you. That's unanimous. And Councillor Andre, Better Care Fund, please, page 119.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report you have before you is, as it says, explains in the executive summary, the Better Care Fund programme supports the Isle of Wight Council and Integrated Care Board to successfully deliver integrated working that best supports island residents. There is a huge amount of planning that goes into preparing the submission, which we have to put through for the Better Care Fund. I have to highlight that the template, the framework that we were given, we have to adhere to national guidelines. So the submission has to be made by the end of March, but we were given the framework quite late, hence the options before you. Shall I go through the recommendation? I'd just like to ask Laura if she'd like to add anything at this point, and then I will go to the recommendations, which I think are self-explanatory. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Laura, is there anything you wish to add?
I wonder, Chair, if it would be helpful just to briefly outline for you the tightness of the timescales. Oh, I'm off mute this
Laura,
end.
you're on mute.
You're on mute. Not working.
Laura, sorry, Laura,
I'm not
we
sure if
can't
it's
hear
working.
you.
I'm
Not
off
on
mute my end.
Do you want to read out the
Hello?
recommendations, Debbie, please?
I go to the recommendation?
Yes, and we'll come back to that.
Thank you, Chair. Oh. You want to try now, Laura? If you
I
want
don't know if you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Ah,
Please go ahead.
sorry. I took myself off of mute and it didn't come off, so apologies for that. I just wondered if it would be useful for Cabinet to have some firm dates in terms of the tightness of the timescales within which we're working. We're unable to progress work around the Better Care Fund until the national guidance is released. The national guidance was released on the 30th of January this year. That obviously tightens the time frame to being just 2 months to turn this piece of work around. In addition to that, there's a secondary piece of guidance, which is the templates that are required for completion. They were only distributed to local authorities and ICBs on the 17th of February. So we continue to work at pace with our ICB colleagues to identify the total quantum of the Better Care Fund for this year, but more specifically the contributions of each party to that pooled fund. For us as a local authority, we receive mandated contributions from the Integrated Care Board to deliver some of our core services and some additional services. Those are uplifted on an annual basis, and it's that annual uplift that's causing some challenges to pin down at the moment. Our colleagues in the ICBs across the country are working with NHS England and with the Department of Health and Social Care to finalise those numbers. And it's for that reason that the numbers are missing from the report you have in front of you. For that, I can only sincerely apologise, but given the tight timescales we're facing, the need for us to collaborate with partners, it's not been possible to provide the fullness of information that we ordinarily would choose to do so for Cabinet to make this decision.
Thank you, Laura. That's really helpful information to us all. Debbie.
Thank you, Leader. So the recommendation before us is that Cabinet approve the Better Care Fund planning undertaken to date for submission to the National Better Care Fund team. That the Cabinet delegate to the Director for Adult Social Care and Housing for the Isle of Wight further development and the submission of the final Better Care Fund 2025-2026 in line with the national guidance deadlines, and make amendments to the allocations and provision of services within the Better Care Fund during its term. That the Cabinet delegate to the Director of Adult Social Care and Housing for the Isle of Wight completion and submission of the required quarterly reporting in collaboration with the Integrated Care Board and subject to approval of the Health and Wellbeing Board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Corporate scrutiny had this to say that the committee are happy for Cabinet to make a delegated decision due to the tight timescales. I think that probably means they're happy for us to make the decision to delegate the decision. Any questions or comments? There are questions and comments.
Sorry, Chair, I should have said I'm looking for a seconder.
Councillor, I thought Councillor Luciani seconded. Let's go for a seconder. That's Councillor Bacon. Thank you. Proposal and seconder, no further questions. Those in favour, please show. That's also unanimous. Thank you. And Cabinet member announcements. I know there aren't many, if any.
Chair, I just wanted to say a massive thanks to everyone involved in the department project. It's been an absolute exemplar project, and having the Chair of Historic England present today, 4 representatives from Arts Council England, the Architectural Fund as well there. It was absolutely amazing to see all that work that's been done there with all these external funders, but also our own internal team to support them. And it has been, you know, as you say, the journey. I mean, you're in your ward, Chair, you're probably aware of some of the journey that we've been on here. But without the council, with its governance structure, being an accountable body, we've even been able to apply for extra grants for it. Without that, the certainty of the council behind these projects and being an advocate and that cheerleader in the background when things are getting tough to help get over certain hurdles, these things won't happen. So I just wanted to take the moment, as it was today, to say thank you to everyone involved in that project, the Isle of Wight Council, Ryde Town Council, and of course all the amazing people at a department and all the funders that came along today. So I just want to take that moment, because you only get these moments very, very often, do we? So I think it's a chance to celebrate, and it's great for Ryde, and they better go on to great, bigger and better things with the neighbourhood funding that's come out as well. So I'm really pleased.
Thank you, Julie. Very worthy cause. I thank you for taking the time to tell us all about it. Karen.
I'm also very excited about department opening, because Ryde Town Council, of course, are going to look after the toilets and the people of Ryde, or people visiting are going to have toilets in the town centre. So thanks to the department.
True. Any further announcements? There are no further announcements. Therefore, consideration forward plan. We've looked at it. Any comments about the forward plan? I think we're all okay with it, aren't we? We're all okay with that. Members' question time, that's us. Any questions that you haven't asked somewhere else before?
There was Laura.
Sure. There are no members' question time. So it just reminds me to say thank you all. Thank you again for the support from our officers and our staff. And it's 5:45. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you.